In this video, we're going to talk about how to use Boolean operators in your if statements. Let's get on with it. We're going to take a look at 3 Boolean operators. And these are the not operator, the and operator, and the or operator. Boolean operators are really useful. They allow you to make your if statements more complex and more specific. So let's start by looking at the not operator. Now this is really straightforward because all it does is reverse a true or false value. So if I have a variable called x and I store the value false and I then print not x, it simply switches it from being false to true. And I could easily store that in a variable instead and say y equals not x, print y, and you can see that it simply switches it round. Let's change that to true. And really, that's it. The Boolean not operator switches true to false and false to true. Let's have a look at another example. Let's say that you've got some code controlling a game lobby, and there's a variable for each player that stores whether or not they've been blocked. I'm going to store the value true. So I could now have a line of code that says something like, if not blocked, then the player is granted access. Else, the player is denied access. So when I run this, it says access denied because the player is blocked. Let's change them to blocked is false. And we'll look at one final example. Let's say that we have a list of colours of the rainbow, and we're going to ask the user to enter a colour. So we're going to have the input function with a message saying something like enter a rainbow colour. So the user will type in a colour, and then we'll say if user colour is in that list of colours, we'll print out a message saying you typed a rainbow colour. Else, print that's not a rainbow colour. Enter a colour of the rainbow, green, you typed a rainbow colour. We could easily change the way that this if statement works by adding the not operator. So now I'm going to say if user colour not in colours, in which case I'd need to switch these two print statements around. Enter a colour of the rainbow, magenta, that's not a rainbow colour. So there we go, some different uses of the Boolean not operator. Now let's move on to talk about the and operator. So let's start by just storing some integer values. Let's have a equals 10, b equals 20, and c equals 30. Now I could do a simple if statement like this that checks to see if a is less than b. And if it is, let's print out a little message saying a is less than b. And of course 10 is less than 20, so it prints out a is less than b. But I could now extend this if statement by putting and b less than c. So if a is less than b and b is less than c, that means that a is less than b and c. So using and, I've been able to combine 2 checks within my if statement. Let's have a look at another example. Let's have a program that asks the user for their name. So we'll use the input function and we'll put a message saying enter your name. Now let's use an if statement to perform a range check. I talk about this in my validation video, but basically it looks like this. If the length of that name variable is more than or equal to 2, so it's 2 or more letters, and the length of the name variable is less than or equal to 20, in other words, they've typed in something that is between 2 and 20 letters long, let's print out a message saying valid name. Else, let's print a message saying invalid name. Let's run it. Enter your name. So if I type in it says invalid name. If I type in something really long, also says invalid name. And if I type something that's just right, it says valid name. So you can see that we've used the AND Boolean operator here to combine two checks in our if statement. Now let's talk about a common error that I see from students when they're using Boolean operators, and it's this. I'm going to remove the second length of name. Now if you read this if statement out loud, it sounds like it makes sense. If length of name is more than or equal to 2 and less than or equal to 20. Now in English that makes sense, but in Python that is incorrect and it will not work. When I run this, it gives me a syntax error. Syntax is kind of like spelling and grammar for programming. It means that what I've typed is not valid Python. So the problem is that on this side of the AND, I have got a complete expression. An expression just means something that gives you a value. So length of name more than or equal to 2, that's going to be true or false, full stop. But when I look at this side of the AND, all I've got is less than or equal to 20. Python doesn't understand that I mean check this again. As far as Python is concerned, that exists on its own. This is a very common error that I see from students. So you have to make sure that on either side of your Boolean operator, you have a complete expression. So by a complete expression, I mean you have a value, you have an operator, and you have another value. That is going to give you true or false. You cannot just have that bit on its own. But there's no reason why both of these expressions have to be to do with checking the length of the name. Let's change this one, so instead of being checking the length of the name, it's checking for something else. Let's see if name 0, that's the first character in the string, dot, is upper. So now my if statement checks to see if the name is 2 letters or more, and that the first character of that name is uppercase. Let's run it again. Enter your name. So again, if I enter something that is too short, it says invalid name. If I enter a name that is long enough, but the first letter isn't uppercase, it says invalid. But as soon as I type in a name that is 2 letters or more and starts with a capital letter, it works. And finally, let's talk about the OR operator. So unlike the AND operator, where all of the things that you combine with AND have to be true in order for the if statement to evaluate true, with the OR operator, only one of the expressions that you put in your if statement has to be true. Let's look at an example. Let's imagine that we have a game with user levels, and I'm going to set the user level to hacker. I could then have an if statement that checks to see if user level is equal to pro, or user level is equal to hacker, or user level is equal to god, colon, print not a noob. So as long as one of those expressions is true, it will print not a noob. And there we go. It's really that simple. Now let's talk about combining these three Boolean operators to make a much more complex if statement. Imagine a game where players can only join if they've either got 1,000,000 XP, or they've been playing for 5 years, and they haven't been banned. So let's go ahead and store some values that we're going to need. So let's have XP, and we're going to give the player 125,000 XP. Let's have a variable called joined. This keeps track of the year they joined, so let's say 2014. And a variable to keep track of whether or not they've been banned. So let's have banned equals false. Now let's create an if statement that checks to see if the player is allowed to join the lobby. So we can say if XP is more than or equal to 1,000,000, or joined is less than or equal to 2015. So that takes care of the first part. Remember I said they were allowed to join the lobby as long as they've got either 1,000,000 XP or they've been playing for 5 years or more. So in this case, the player hasn't got 1,000,000 XP, but they have been playing long enough. And remember, with an OR, only one of those needs to be true. Now what I'm going to do is put brackets around all of that, because I want that to be checked first. And if one of those is true, I also need to check that they haven't been banned. So I'm going to put and not banned. And we'll go ahead and print a message saying something like access granted, else access denied. So run this, and it says access granted. Let's try changing the value of the variables and see what happens. So let's say that they joined in 2018. Well, they've only been playing for a couple of years. They don't have enough XP. Access has been denied. Okay. Let's put an extra 0 on their XP. So now they've got over 1 million XP, but they've only been playing for 2 years. They must have played really hard for those 2 years, and they still haven't been banned. So now, access is granted. Now let's say that they've been playing for ages, they've got loads of XP, but they've been banned. So even though both of these are going to evaluate to true, they've been banned. So it should say access denied. And now you're able to use Boolean operators to make your if statements more complex and more specific. See you next time.